What have you always wanted to know about Boise State Public Radio? Join us for another round Wednesday, March 19th at Mad Swede Brew Hall in downtown Boise from 6 to 8 p.m. Learn more about our operations, news content, and our service mission. We welcome your questions and look forward to sharing more about what we do here at Boise State Public Radio. More details can be found on our website at boisestatepublicradio.org.
From the studios of Boise State Public Radio News, I'm Gemma Gaudette. This is Idaho Matters. On Friday, the Idaho Senate passed a bill to ban public camping or sleeping on city streets or in cars. Also last week, a Senate committee began discussion on another bill that would limit where new homeless shelters could be built. Now, both of these bills would have a direct impact on Interfaith Sanctuary. That's the Boise shelter, which is trying to move from downtown to State Street and expand its operations so it can help more people who are facing homelessness. The construction of the new site is on hold after the Idaho Supreme Court said there were problems with how the city of Boise approved the permit for the building. Now, that has left the future shelter in limbo while the city contemplates changing its permitting rules that would allow Interfaith another chance at getting a permit. Jody Peterson is the executive director of the Interfaith Sanctuary Shelter, and she has been riding quite the roller coaster of events over the past 2 months. She's here for an update on those two bills, what they mean for her clients, as well as the future of Interfaith. Jody, nice to have you back on the program.
Thanks, Gemma. So nice to be here.
So, Jody, I want to start our conversation today with those two bills I mentioned. There is one to ban public camping. So if passed, what would that do?
Basically, if someone was, and the definition in the bill is it implements a statewide ban on camping or sleeping in public spaces. It creates an extremely broad definition of camping that includes sleeping in cars, resting in parks, or sitting on public walkways. And what it's asking the cities to do is to implement this law and basically cite and jail people who are outside doing any of these things.
How would this bill, if passed, Jody, affect your clients?
Well, currently in our shelter space, that's 10,000 square feet, we are not able to allow all of our guests who we serve by night to stay with us by day. And so they are removed from the building at 8 a.m. They navigate the streets, use the supportive services and things like that until the shelter can reopen. That's not the case for all of our guests. Many go to school, to work, they have doctor's appointments, things like that. But the fact is, there is only one day shelter. And so oftentimes people are outside and they will get cited if they're sitting or sleeping. The new shelter is built and designed to improve that by creating a space that anyone who stays with us can stay with us day or night. But that shelter doesn't exist yet. And what we have is a growing population of need with not enough shelter day or night. And this bill is going to put a lot of pressure on the police.
So let's talk about that, can we? Because you testified that putting people who are sleeping on the street in jail will actually not help. In fact, what it will do is impact the Boise Police Department as well. You work with the Boise Police, don't you, to really help these clients of yours?
Absolutely. Boise has done a really good job of street outreach. They have a bike unit and they know our guests as well as we do. They know Corpus Christi. They know the other shelter systems. They know who the people are who are experiencing chronic homelessness and those who maybe are out because there's just not a place for them to be. They work really hard to connect our unhoused to resources and services. So they're already doing this work in a very meaningful way. There's already steps in place that require the police. They'll call the shelters to see if there's any space at night before ticketing someone who's outside. But if there is space, they'll move that person to the shelter. So this is asking them to do their work in a much different way.
I want to look at the other bill as well, Jody. It would require that shelters have to be 300 feet from a residential property. Would that impact your new shelter that's being built on State Street?
Absolutely. I mean, Gemma, I'm going to be really honest. This bill is targeted at Interfaith Sanctuary's new shelter on State Street, but it impacts an entire state.
So with that said, do you have concerns about being able to move forward if these bills are passed?
Well, 1141 makes our work much harder because if people are getting ticketed and moved into jail because of outstanding citations, things like that, it's very hard to move them out of homelessness because now these things are on their background checks. They're going to jail instead of going to work. And it's basically making them more homeless.
Mhm.
But it does not stop Interfaith Sanctuary from doing our work. If Bill 1166 passes, it would stop the construction of that new shelter. It would not be able to open as a shelter where 205 unhoused guests would be able to stay day and night. Families with children, medically fragile. And we, as you know, we sold our building to buy the new building. And so it puts this
Mhm.
city at great risk of losing a shelter system. And across the state, the thing that's important to understand is the way the bill is written today, however many shelter beds you have within cities of 100,000 plus, you cannot add one more bed after that because the
Mm.
shelters are within residential areas. So basically, none of us could expand services or add on to our buildings. Interfaith was actually founded by 39 faith leaders, and the whole shelter program started in churches. People stayed there, and then they moved to a different church, and it was just all volunteer reach out until we were able to purchase the building where we now have Interfaith. This bill basically would say churches are not allowed to offer shelter to those in need if they're within 300 feet of a residential area. Most churches are in residential neighborhoods.
Mhm.
And so you're stopping a state from being able to care for our neighbors who fall into homelessness.
I want to turn now in our last couple of minutes, Jody, to the Idaho Supreme Court's ruling in January that your permit for the new shelter was invalid. Can you try to get a new permit from the city of Boise?
Yeah, the city of Boise is rewriting the ordinance that allowed the Supreme Court to overturn their basically their approval of our application. It was loose language that just needed to be fixed. And so once that is formalized, we will be able to move an application back in under the new modern zoning code and hopefully stay within our timeline of opening that new shelter in October should we be able to overcome Bill 1166.
Mhm.
So we do need a call out to our community for those who care about how we're taking care of our unhoused neighbors in our community. Letting the senators know how you feel about 1141 and 1166 is really important. It's important for supporters to make their voices heard because we know we have a very supportive community. Gemma, we've raised $10.6 million in private dollars to build this new shelter because people in our community believe in the work we're doing. It's not taxpayer dollars that is doing the work. We are private and we want to do this work for our neighbors. And so it needs to be really understood that we want to be in a position to keep our city and community safe and also lift people up who've fallen into homelessness.
Does it give you some hope, Jody, that a lot of people have already come out against these bills, including the city of Boise, but also the city of Boise's chief of police?
Yes, yes, absolutely. It certainly shows a unified voice within the city of Boise about we are Boise kind, and we do know that together, like with our continuum of care and with our new police chief, he is so clear about the role of the police with our unhoused population. They're doing a phenomenal job and even more outreach now. And so, yeah, it's really uplifting. And I can tell you that I've heard that the inboxes of the senators is overflowing with no's, and that feels very good. Our community is definitely stepping up to say, no, 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 this is not right. And so, yeah, it's what allows me to keep doing the work, Gemma.
Well, Jody, I really appreciate you taking time. I know how busy you've been and there's so much going on. So appreciate you coming in and talking about this.
Thank you. And thanks for giving us the time to kind of explain things. And on our website at interfaithsanctuary.org, we do break down both of the bills and let people know exactly what is in the definitions of these bills. So I think if it makes sense to, get the details, get the facts.
We've been speaking with Jody Peterson, the executive director of Interfaith Sanctuary, about two new bills that could directly impact the future of the shelter. We will, of course, put links on our website, boisestatepublicradio.org. And make sure you keep listening to Idaho Matters over the next few weeks as we do take a closer look at this issue and all of the people involved in it. And that'll do it for this episode of Idaho Matters. Thanks so much for listening. And just a reminder, you can find all of our episodes wherever you get your podcasts.